My name is Austin Sailors. I work at Docker. I'm on the HR team. I actually sit just a few desks away from these guys, so I'm really excited to introduce them. I'll be emceeing this the community theater talk track today. Like I said, we've got a lot of good talks. I think hopefully you guys are going to stay around for some of the other ones. But first up, we have Amn Rahman. Oh, I kind of said that a little bit wrong. We were just talking about how easy it is to mispronounce Amin's name because it's just like a very slight vowel sound. Amn Rahman. There we go. All right, I got it. I'm going to try to do really good with all the speakers' name pronunciations today. I asked them for phonetic spellings ahead of time. But Amin, I know her too well. I didn't even ask for that, so that's all on me. But these two are amazing people. They're on the data team at Docker. From an HR perspective, they've already done some amazing stuff with our data. They help out the entire company. They build some really amazing data pipelines and have some really good thoughts on what they can do with data. I mean, they already know that you're going to love this talk, so I trust them. But again, Brian Donaldson, Amn Rahman, and I'll give it up to you guys. Go for it.
Thanks, Austin. You almost sounded like an engineer.
Well, welcome. We welcome you to Data Tells Us You Will Love This Talk. As you learned, I'm Brian Donaldson.
I'm Amn Rahman.
So, data team at Docker. The thing we're trying to achieve is we want to build a data-centric culture. So this is where people can get the information they need to measure and improve and make smarter data-driven decisions. And normally, data teams, kind of depending on what they produce, you might find them in a product engineering org or other places. But as we service the entire company, we're trying to apply data services to the entire company, we actually are organized under IT. And this has a couple other advantages as well because it keeps us close to the system owners so that we can have good change control as well as data governance. A couple of examples of the types of data that we're delivering, we're working with all these teams, is like sales and marketing, of course, want to keep track of like how the pipeline's doing, lead funnel conversion. Product engineering, very, very excited about understanding new feature adoption, product adoption. Voice of the customer, what are the customers asking for? We help them track this. And of course, product quality. For HR and recruiting, that's a little bit interesting there because like they're both looking at like who are the people we're bringing into Docker? How's our recruiting pipeline doing? As well as keeping track on like health metrics, like we're training the people we want. What interesting culture metrics can we come up with, and can we look at like how we're growing across the globe? Docker has many different offices across the world. For customer success, of course, that's all about like quantifying our customers' happiness, typically done with metrics like CSAT or Net Promoter Score. And they're also tracking volume of like support tickets or how they're doing in terms of their meeting their SLA guidelines. And finance, we work a lot with finance just in terms of like setting targets and kind of understanding spend, cash flow, and how people are doing with their budgets. So this is a slight oversimplification of our data stack. We're a small team, so it's important that we choose tooling that really helps us deliver and be agile and be quick. But we also want to make sure that we have full visibility over all the data that flows through the company. This allows us to deliver our insights. So as you can see, there's multiple different layers here. What we're trying to do is take everything up in the sources and get it down into the warehouse where we can then mix it up and eventually present it to our end users as data products. For customer touch points, typically on the web, like you might see Docker Docs or Docker Hub or www, a lot of those events are funneled into an event collection and routing system that we use called Segment. And Segment does a few nice things for us. For one, it's going to like take those events and it's also going to route them to other systems that people need to use, like Marketo. But Segment also does the work of taking data from Salesforce or Marketo and brings it into the warehouse for us, syncs all that data there so it's there for us to mix and play with. Segment also handles all like the schema management, so that's less work for us, and we don't have to worry about doing that and the scaling bit. But that's only part of it. So of course, like for the more complicated things, this is where the custom data pipelines come in. And we'd be rather remiss if we were not trying to leverage what our company's good at, our core assets, to help us do our job better. And so for this, we're using Docker Enterprise Edition running in AWS to manage all of our custom data pipelines. Now, so what are these custom data pipelines doing? Well, for one thing, they're going to be looking at like cases where you need complex joins, or you're trying to take an event stream and transform it into something that's got history, so people can look at a time series where there wasn't one before. Or sometimes we have like a lot of batch orchestration, or even like custom integrations with APIs. So we pull from a lot of data sources. You can see some of them at the top. Not all of them have those nice turnkey integrations where you click and the data starts flowing. Some of them you literally have to automate going in there to extract a report. So these are the type of work that we get involved with. And we containerize all these ETL processes and some data services, run it on the cluster, and we use Jenkins as essentially the way to manage these data pipelines. Now, I don't know, has anyone here used Jenkins? Do we have a few people? Okay, so you're pretty familiar with it. You even saw it referenced in the keynote as a common way to do builds. We're using it as a way to kind of manage our data pipelines. So a lot of times, like we can leverage the same things like alerting when things go wrong. Jenkins can tell us about that. Jenkins is really good about having good Docker support through plugins, and it has a really nice language for being declarative about what your pipeline looks like. So you can check that into GitHub. Now you've got your pipeline as code. That's really important for us. All of these custom data pipelines, for the most part, we follow a pattern where we're pulling it into Amazon S3. It gives us a lot of flexibility. And our data warehouse, we're running it on Snowflake. So Snowflake is actually pretty adept at taking S3 data, loading it in, making that really easy. And it even has a feature where if you wanted to, you can use Snowpipe. So it'll watch your S3 bucket. As files arrive, it'll automatically load them for you, and you can kind of monitor how that's doing. That makes it so much easier to deal with large like logs and other types of like high volume, just giant data sets if you can have it kind of continuously be loaded automatically. So once we get this in the warehouse, there's two kinds of use cases where we've got the warehouse doing all these loads. We also have the warehouse presenting this data to our end users through the presentation layer, Looker. And Snowflake, again, one thing to check out there is like you can scale the compute and storage separately. So we actually have separate auto-scaling clusters that are able to like handle these different loads. And so finally, it's in Looker, which we consider our source of truth, and that's where people consume it.
Can everyone hear me all right in the back? Awesome. So just digging in a little bit more into the custom ETL part and Jenkins, just because we're in IT does not mean we're like divorced from engineering process. So we try to plug into that as much as we can. And we have a CI workflow in place. So when we push code to GitHub with test cases, because if I don't add test cases, Brian will never accept my pull request. So we have to have test cases in there. So after running test cases locally, we push the code, and Circle CI there helps us out with our unit and integration tests, and kind of helps us also build our Docker image and tag it and bump it and push it to Docker Hub. So we don't have to take care of that process for us, and it allows us for speedier deployments. So once it's in Docker Hub now, Jenkins can pull the latest image from Hub and deploy it onto our containers that are running our ETL jobs. Now, using Docker Enterprise here helps us because it provides us with the layer visibility on our containers using UCP, our Universal Control Plane, as well as allowing us the ability to give feedback to the product and engineering teams on how we are using the product. So this dogfooding aspect kind of brings it full circle with us using our products. And we hope to kind of switch over to Docker Enterprise 3.0 as well soon. So moving on, what really goes into building a data product? So the first phase is that you need to get to know the people, the team, and their systems. So what ends up happening is that we need to first look at what's going on, how does the process work? So if it's a recruiting pipeline, how do we go from like a candidate applying eventually to getting hired or rejected, or the sales process, how does the marketing funnel operate? So what we end up doing is create a state machine diagram for every process, and then we kind of iterate over it to make sure that we've captured all of the flows correctly, so we can deliver on metrics appropriately. And in addition, one of the other questions that we always ask our teams is, do they want data to be recorded in terms of like time series objects? So at times what happens is certain APIs only give you the latest value of a particular object. So if you want to track it over history, over time, in terms of history, what changed, have provenance of the data point, then we sort of keep getting time series data instead of fetching the latest metrics from whatever API that we are consuming from. And in terms of just generally speaking, what we also try to look at is just be inside the system, maybe generate fake objects and kind of see them go through the entire life cycle in a system. And just generally looking into pain points, how are they collecting data right now, what's going on. So let's say, for instance, if recruiting is using a reporting tool that does not let them drill into the data, then maybe we can perhaps provide them with that capability. So then there's more buy-in and they trust the data because they know what's contained in the metrics on an aggregated level that they're seeing. So then comes like the build part. And within building, it's an iterative process. We keep going over different dashboard designs, provide different visualizations. So whatever makes sense to the team using them. So if they want to use them on a regular basis in their daily stand-ups, or if they want to look at them, the metrics, on an ongoing basis, we need to make sure that the data makes sense and the dashboards are self-explanatory. And the final part is the transformation part where the data kind of feeds back into the process and helps improve it. I'll let Brian take over to talk a little bit more about dashboarding principles that we use.
So is everyone able to see this? Well, I can speak to it. Essentially, the products we're producing in terms of dashboarding, we try and follow a few principles. Like this is using Looker, but of course, your system might be different. But I think a lot of the same principles apply, which is that you want to give people ways to understand the filters that they can apply on the dashboard to narrow to maybe a particular set of interest. Say like if you're a particular sales territory you want to dive into. You also want to spend the time to build a decent data dictionary. We can't emphasize enough how many times we see the same people, different people using the same metric name for kind of completely two different things. The data dictionary helped really clarify what you're looking at. Put help links on there, so people who have questions, we use a lot of Slack. You'll hear kind of more about the tooling we use later. But make sure that they know how to find the Slack channel where they can ask for directions and support. Other things you'll see on here, Looker is pretty good about adding hovers for descriptions. You want a little additional information on it. And we put callouts. So why am I looking at this tile? It might be interesting, but what am I supposed to glean from this? You put a call out on the top, like what's the question we're trying to answer, as well as, if actions you can take to really make use of that data. Since we expect eventually to hand this off to a product owner who'll take ownership of the dashboard, you also want to give them some tools. Like we put at the top, here's all the people that are looking at the dashboard. Here's the frequency the dashboard is being consumed. Try to make it something that's a little bit more alive so they can really see, are people engaging with this information? And of course, everyone sort of likes to see their name up there. So that in itself kind of brings them back. So these types of principles will help you make a dashboard that's more alive and actionable than just something that's sitting there kind of looking nice.
So what exactly helps us sort of do everything and run our entire process as a small team? We provide technical support through Jira, so people can create Jira tickets whenever there's a problem or they want to kind of talk about new metrics. We use documentation. We use Confluence for all of our documentation and recording retrospectives. We also conduct training and office hours every Friday. And then we also try to have like cross-org alignment with people, so have regular cadence on different metrics, what's going on upstream, what are the new product changes that we might be having. So we're kind of integrated into these conversations earlier on rather than later. And generally speaking, we operate as an agile team with daily stand-ups, sprint check-ins, retrospectives, and all of that. And then above all, I think having clear communication is super important, which is why we have Slack, we have Zoom, just to kind of keep a regular cadence with everyone. So coming finally back to like the third part of what we do, the transformation aspect. So beyond just setting basic KPIs and tracking metrics, what's really important is the layer of accountability and visibility that we add in terms of value. So if we are targeting towards a certain number, it gives us the accountability to check, well, were we able to achieve that number or not? Why not? Look into the provenance of the data, look into the processes and see what's going on. Then on a similar note, if we're looking into testing a hypothesis, so for instance, someone says that, perhaps using web layout B would help improve the engagement on the DockerCon website. So we can test that, and then we can show that in terms of metrics, and you can track engagement and know whether it was working or not. And one of the things that's super interesting to me is how inadvertently the entire metrics process reveals the hygiene of the system itself. So if, let's say, your technical account managers aren't using Salesforce properly or are not filling out certain fields, it kind of highlights that. So that's super important in terms of maintaining the hygiene of the system and giving proper sales and customer success training. Alerting, super powerful. So let's say if a customer ticket does not get touched for let's say 3 days or 2 days, and people can vary this threshold, but you should be able to get alerted or a supervisor that someone hasn't responded to this customer ticket and it's urgent. So having better alerting is always key. And lastly, is something I've already talked about before, is having the provenance of the data. So knowing how a data point changed over time, providing the provenance and the traceability of a data point is integral, and that's how we kind of bring more value to the metrics layer. So we have learned a lot from this process, and it's been over 2 years now,
years,
Brian.
yeah.
But we're trying to empower more people to make their own dashboards. Otherwise, we'll just keep on getting swamped with data all the time and data requests. So we can't possibly do that in an endless loop. So now we're trying to empower more people to kind of own their dashboards and create changes. And having data owners is important because at times something might change upstream. Let's say a deal object changes and we don't know about it. So then our metrics won't really be able to capture the exact flow. So in order to be able to model things appropriately, we have to be notified. So having a data owner sort of checking on the data and letting us know, hey guys, that number kind of looks off to me, really helps us out because we are monitoring data for so many different teams that it can get pretty much impossible for us to be able to check each and every number and know that it's accurate. Then data dictionaries, Brian has already talked to you about. And then lastly is, again, open and responsive communication channels. And we can't drive this enough. It's because people need to feel comfortable to approach you so that they're able to trust you with their data as well. Because at times when it comes to privacy and security of data, we also try to maintain, so for instance, HR or recruiting would want the highest form of privacy for their data as well. So we'd have end-to-end encryption, data access control at the Snowflake layer, as well as above within Looker to prevent any form of entry into the data itself.
So all this, of course, comes with its own set of challenges. As we mentioned earlier, we're trying to change culture. Culture always has inertia. You're trying to present people with a vision that's compelling to say, this is how we need to move to kind of mature our use of data at this organization. And some of the bullet points underneath that are inhibitors. So disparate systems, when you have groups that own and manage their own systems but aren't talking, then at some point they're going to ask, say for like looking at the customer journey, they're going to ask us to trace across these two systems and we won't be able to join the data because that wasn't thought out from in the initial design. Or one-off reports. It always sounds cool to be able to help people like, hey, you've got a data question, here's your data. They're happy, but as you can imagine, these pile up. And what we want to develop are people that are taking metrics and running with it and continuously coming back and working to drive decisions from it, not just sort of one-off data concierge. That's not scalable, especially for this team. Data discovery, retiring unused content. We see it still. We're still always working to try and figure out how to connect people with the authoritative report that says what this metric is. And retiring unused content's a big part of that, so people that are new to the system aren't distracted by things they really shouldn't be looking at. Of course, over-reliance on our team for changes. As Amn said, we need to empower people to be able to build their own reporting and take what we've done and derive more insights off of it so that the whole organization is able to action on data and not just sort of bottlenecked just by one team. And then finally, the challenge that everyone still faces, I'm sure everyone out in the audience as well, is like upstream data quality. If you can't get your system owners to go in there and fix problems, that's going to show up in your reports downstream. So a lot of what we do, as Amn mentioned, was try and create alerting or insight to show where there's gaps or where there's problems so we can go out and work with the system owners to get them fixed. So that's in a nutshell. Thanks for coming out and watching the presentation.
And one of our colleagues from our team will have an open source summit track, which is, I think, on Thursday, 2:30 to 4:30. He'll be talking a lot about a new architecture that we are sort of doing in the data team. And so please try and check that out. That's on Thursday. And we have our Twitter handles. We use them occasionally, but feel free to reach out. We will respond.
Awesome. Let's give it up for the Docker data team. We have Rich Braun from Splunk up next in just a second here, but do we have any questions for Amn or Brian? We have a couple minutes for a few questions if anybody's got them. And Rich Braun, Rich, if you're around, get ready to come on up. We got you in just a couple minutes.
Come on down.
Any questions? Rich? Okay, cool. We got Rich on deck. Perfect. We still have a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. Any questions at all?
That means we did a good job.
All right, you nailed it. Thank you so much. Let's give it up again for Amn and Brian from the Docker Data team.